Coming up today, whose leak is it anyway? We meet the homeowner who's being billed to fix a water pipe that's not even under her property.
Plus, the near £300,000 rare whisky investment that could cost one man almost everything he owns.
And the clocked car that keeps coming back. Just months after we helped convince one dealership to take it back, it's been put up for sale again with no warning that it's being clocked. We're asking how on earth that could happen.
This is Rip Off Britain. Hello, now we're delighted you've been able to join us for Rip Off Britain. And of course, we're here to help you get answers to the mysteries that threaten to leave you seriously out of pocket.
So today we're on the case for people who were getting nowhere when they tried to solve things on their own. So they called on us for help, and our team just jumped into action. Ably assisted, of course, by some of the best consumer brains in the country.
Two of whom are with us all programme. Personal finance expert Sarah Pennells and solicitor Gary Rycroft, who will be hard at work answering your questions, including what to do if those ruddy potholes wreak havoc on your cars.
But first today to a puzzle that on the face of it all seems like it should have been far easier to solve. Now, if a leak happens in an underground pipe on the other side of your garden wall, who is responsible for fixing it? It's quite a question, and that's the one that was facing the person in our first film today. But as we discovered when we got involved, the answer is really complicated, and it could affect every homeowner in the country.
A chocolate box cottage nestled in the pretty village of Alton in Staffordshire. Home from home to Jenny Granger, and also her workplace for more than a decade.
When I first came here, I was quite thrilled with it because it's quite a pretty looking house, and then the shop was where my lounge is.
Jenny's cottage used to be a post office, and the retired postmistress, who's now 85, took great pride in serving the community when she moved here almost 40 years ago.
It was a lovely shop, a lovely counter full of cold bits and pieces. Sweets on one side, and the children would come and pick their sweets. It's lovely because I really loved the shop.
After retiring in 1996, Jenny's beloved post office was converted into her house. But in October 2023, the peace that she'd found here later in life was shattered. Workmen turned up unannounced and started digging up the path directly outside her home.
I went over and the men said, "We're looking for a leak. We're not sure where it is, but we think it's on your property." And I said, "I haven't seen any leak. I'm not aware of that, either inside or out." "Well, we'll find it, don't worry," they said.
And find it they did. But the spot in question wasn't on her property. It was the other side of her garden wall. So when the workmen returned, Jenny was shocked by the news they brought with them.
They said, "It'll be your responsibility." And I said, "Why? You're not digging on my property." And they said, "You've got a connection here, and it feeds your house."
Having been shown no evidence of a leak on her land, Jenny refused to accept that it was her responsibility to fix.
It appears that this leak is outside my boundary, and therefore, I think, not my responsibility. Now, who it does belong to is anybody's guess.
There were more visits to investigate the leak. And then a legal notice from her water company, Severn Trent.
"We found a water leak on your private supply pipe at your property. Please read this letter carefully. It's your responsibility to fix it as soon as possible."
The private supply pipe connects the water mains to Jenny's home, and Severn Trent's letter said that unless she acted quickly, the water company would carry out the work and send Jenny the bill.
I felt quite unhappy about it, especially as it's outside my boundary. And it just distresses me, and I think it's very wrong.
So Jenny turned to her friend David for help.
Hello, Jen.
How are you, love?
I was my bestest friend.
I'll make you a nice cuppa.
And his first thought was whether this might be something Jenny was already covered against. Sure enough, he found out her emergency home repair cover does include pipes and drains. But when he called up, he didn't get far.
Soon as it was discovered that it was not on her property, they did not want anything to do with it at all, saying it was not their responsibility. Absolutely categoric they were over this. No discussions really at all.
With all other options exhausted, Jenny was concerned that Severn Trent would plough on, fix the leak, and she'd have no idea of the cost that she'd be landed with. So instead, Jenny hired a local plumber for the job, which cost her more than £1,000. But she and David want a second opinion on whether Jenny was truly responsible for a leak in the street outside. Enter Steve Greby, Policy Manager for the Consumer Council for Water, the body representing customers of water companies in England and Wales, and an expert in this sort of case. He's had a look at the site of the leak and can settle the debate once and for all.
So, Jenny and David, I've had a look at where I think is the layout of the pipework here. The water companies will have a water main running down the middle of the road here, and their responsibility ends at the moment their pipework crosses the boundary here. Now, I understand your boundary wall is here and this land doesn't belong to you, but the pipework beneath the path does belong to you if it serves your property. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the pipework that was leaking here is so unfortunate, because I understand you have insurance for the pipework, but it doesn't cover you outside the boundary of your property. And it just turns out, because of the unusual layout of the pipework and it's outside the boundary of your land, it's still your responsibility, I'm afraid.
I think it's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Because this was never ever mentioned to me years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've worked hard all my life. I just think it's disgraceful.
As the news sinks in, the group head inside for a cup of tea.
Now that you have been, Steve, and you've put our minds at rest, I can't say I'm happy about it, but I understand it now, and thank you.
I express my thanks for you coming and putting a final touch to it all. And hopefully we won't meet again, other than under much pleasant circumstances. And I'll buy you a pint.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, when we spoke to Severn Trent Water, it told us it understands how worrying a situation like this can be for homeowners like Jenny, but stressed that it is their responsibility to fix leaks found in the customer-owned supply pipe.
And Severn Trent said it understands people might not be aware of this, so it's increasing the information it gives customers about their responsibilities, and it's allowing more time for repairs to be made. It reassured Jenny that the location of the leak means that it won't have been recorded by Jenny's water meter and she won't have paid for the lost water, so that's a relief.
Well, Solicitor Gary Rycroft is with me now to try and sort out this conundrum, and I think we've probably all, Gary, got enormous sympathy for Jenny and the situation that she finds herself in. But I'm sure that a lot of us are also thinking, I wonder if we have a similar position with our water pipes.
Enormous sympathy for Jenny, and yes, the reality of the situation, Angela, is that the boundary of your property and responsibility above the ground doesn't always correspond with what's going on below the ground. So here's a very handy diagram. Now, the crucial pipe here is the communication pipe, sometimes called the supply pipe. That comes from the water main, and that is the responsibility of the water company up to the external stop tap and meter.
And that's the one that feeds the water on the mains, as it were,
Exactly.
into your property.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then beyond the external stop tap and meter is the pipe that goes into your property, and that is the responsibility of you, the homeowner, the person that pays the water bill. Now, the issue, as Jenny has found, is that it would be very nice if the external stop tap was on the boundary of your property, and so you are responsible for everything within your boundary. But very often, your responsibility starts beyond your boundary, and not many people understand that or even realise that. So it can be very confusing when it comes down to a situation like Jenny, where she's thinking, well, I didn't even know that this was my responsibility.
I certainly would not have thought about that, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers wouldn't either. How would you be able to discover whether or not you were in a similar situation to Jenny here?
Well, nowadays, when you buy a property, you can purchase a specific conveyancing search, which is information provided by your local water company to actually show the place where the water supply goes in and out of your property. And if you've not done that when you bought the property, you can buy one now, retrospectively, or you can actually just contact your water company and ask them to provide that information. So I would urge people watching this to think about doing that, because it's a really good idea to know where your responsibility starts and ends.
Now, the thing is, I think Jenny took out an insurance policy to cover pipes, water pipes, just in case she had a flood at any time. But when she went to the insurance company, they said, sorry, this bit of the pipe doesn't count. How come?
Yeah, I suspect that this is down to an issue that insurance companies called lack of insurable interest. And what that means is that you can't take out an insurance policy for something that you don't own. Now, this is a bit of a grey area for Jenny, because the insurance company is saying, well, you don't own the land. She may not even own the pipe, and yet the water company are saying, well, you're responsible for the pipe. So I can see why Jenny feels that she's in a very difficult situation. And again, I would urge Jenny and other people in this situation to talk to their insurance company to find out whether they actually are insured or not.
Yeah, and it's a real catch-22, this, isn't it?
It does seem like that, doesn't it? But I do think Jenny should go back to the water company, and if she doesn't get satisfaction from the water company, she can always go to Ofwat, the water regulator, and see what they have to say.
Well, as always, terrific advice there, Gary, and we have, of course, put that diagram and a link to more information about all of this subject on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk/Rip-Off Britain. Gary, as always, thank you very much indeed.
Time now for our advice clinic, where some of the nation's best experts are standing up for your rights. Well, with me in the advice clinic today is personal finance expert Sarah Pennells. And Sarah, we've called you in today to talk to Katie Clamp, who's joining us from her home. Hi, Katie.
Hello.
I know you've got quite a story about a mattress, and it goes back to Black Friday. You bagged yourself what seemed like a real bargain from the mattress company called Emma. So far, so good. Then what happened?
Yeah, so we moved into a new house in October, which was around the time of the Black Friday sales. And we'd seen a lot of adverts on social media and TV for Emma, who sell mattresses and beds. So we decided to buy a super king size bed and a mattress. So we paid £1,377 for it. So we were very happy. It said it would be delivered within the next 1 to 2 weeks.
But unfortunately, that wasn't to be. 2 weeks passed without any sign of the bed, so Katie contacted Emma. She was told the order was in progress, but a fortnight later there was still no sign of the bed, a situation that continued for the next 2 months.
We then approach Christmas time. I'm told that the warehouse have shipped the mattress and the bed base, but they haven't got the cover and the feet. Would I like just the stuff they've got, or do I want to wait for the whole order? I said I wanted to wait for the whole order because I couldn't use the bed without the other things. So then we get to about mid-January. They say, actually, we think it will be quicker if we put a new order through for just the feet and the cover. So I took the day off work. I was waiting for the order. What arrived was a cover and some feet. No mattress, no bed base, no headboard.
When Emma did re-deliver the headboard at the end of January, Katie realised the bed base was the wrong size to fit it. So the company promised to deliver a new base, which finally arrived in March, some 5 months after the original order was placed.
The bed base that arrived was unpackaged. It was ripped down the back and it appeared to have hair on it.
Oh,
so we kind of said, we're not even taking this in the house. Please take it back. That was on the 5th of March. And we still have no new bed base, still sleeping in the spare room with our bedroom full of half a bed.
Katie, absolute nightmare you've been through. Sarah, hard to know where to begin with this, but what do you make of it?
Well, it really is the kind of problem that's going to give you sleepless nights, isn't it? I mean, sadly for Katie, she's not on her own, because there are other people who have complained to consumer review sites about the fact that they've ordered items and they've not turned up, and they've tried to get them delivered and there have been problems.
How long should you normally give a company before you start getting tough with them?
Well, if you buy anything, you're protected by the Consumer Rights Act. And that says that if a company says it's going to deliver something by a particular date, maybe you've specified you want it delivered for an event or Christmas, then they should deliver it by then. And if they don't, you've got the right to cancel the sale and get all your money back. If it's not for a particular event, basically you've got one opportunity to put things right. If they don't deliver the item by the second date or by 30 days, then you can cancel the sale and, again, get your money back.
Yeah, what about the money aspect of it?
Well, I was going to ask, Katie, how did you pay for the order?
And we paid on our American Express card.
If you pay by credit card, then you're protected by Section 75 of the Consumer Rights Act. Now, that means that the credit card company is jointly liable along with the retailer if there's a problem. Now, the rules say that the item has to cost between £100 and £30,000, which obviously in this case it would have fallen into that category. However, as with the Consumer Rights Act, the real problem is these both give you ways of getting your money back so you're not out of pocket. What they don't do is give you what Katie wants, which is the bed and the frame and the mattress that she ordered at the price she ordered it.
Well, Katie, when you came to us, we got straight on to Emma, which said sorry, acknowledging the frustration you've experienced. It said it's investigating what caused all this, and it's aware that other customers have also been affected by issues with its deliveries and customer service. It's apologised to anyone affected, stressed it's working hard to resolve the issues, and is seeing what it calls significant improvements. And Katie, I think we've got a bit of a result for you. Emma has confirmed that your bed has now left the warehouse. Hooray! And you're being given a partial refund. So what do you make of all that?
That's great news. I mean, we just want the bed. We've been waiting so long for it now, almost 5 months. So that's great news. I hope it does actually come. And I mean, I think, you know, finally to be done with all this would be good.
Yeah, well, we're crossing our fingers for sweet dreams about to arrive. Thank you so much for bringing the story to us. And thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Much to Katie's relief, the bed did arrive just a few days after we filmed with her, so she's no longer sleeping in the spare room.
I have to say, like Katie, I would be furious if I had to wait that long just to get a bed. Well, if you have a problem that you'd like the experts in our advice clinic to tackle, then please send it in. Our email address is ripoffbritain@bbc.co.uk, or you could send us a message on Facebook, where we are BBC Ripoff Britain.
We are now also contactable on WhatsApp, and the number is 0330 678 1321. And our postal address is Ripoff Britain, BBC Media City UK, Salford, M52BH. But as usual, we say, please don't send us any original documents because, unfortunately, we can't return them.
Well, next to the sort of story that unfortunately comes into our inbox and our mailbag rather too often, it's those letters and emails that we get that are often from friends or family members of people who put their life savings into what seemed to be a surefire investment, and they're now worried that it might have all gone.
When the family in this next film wrote to us, it was out of sheer desperation. And when we heard what the investment had gone into, we simply had to investigate where almost £300,000 of one man's savings and pensions has really gone.
Look at all this stuff downsizing. They won't even fit. Oh, this naturally happens.
John Gilbert is looking through what's left from his house move last year. But it wasn't a move that he made through choice. He'd been forced into saving money after an investment he made in 2021 went disastrously wrong.
I was investing carefully in stocks and shares, but this one investment, Matthew Adams, has caused me a lot of stress and unnecessary insecurity.
Looking for a decent return on his money to help him live comfortably in his later years, John came across a company called Matthew Adams Limited of Kent, not to be confused with any company of a similar name. It specialised in high-value portfolios of wines and spirits. After liquidating a separate wine investment, it convinced John that there were great returns to be made in buying rare whiskey.
And they said, well, you should be really invested. And they were talking to me and they said, we have a whiskey outlet as well, you know. They could help you. And that's how I got into the whiskey.
The salesperson explained that the company would buy a portfolio of valuable vintage bottles of whiskey on John's behalf, which would be stored safely in a warehouse and then sold at a later date, hopefully for profit.
I explained to them that I knew nothing. No problem. We'll talk you through it. We should send you some magazines, books, what have you, to look at it.
Now, unlike traditional investments, such as stocks or bonds, investing in whiskey is not regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, which means there's no access to the Financial Services Compensation Scheme if things go wrong. John says he was convinced by the salesperson to put £74,000 into buying whiskey, and not long after that, he was convinced to put in even more.
I was getting calls regularly, at least a couple of times a week, if not more. All the calls that came to me was about more money, more money, more money.
Over a period of 2 years, John invested an increasing amount of money into a complex array of whiskey portfolios. To fund the payments, John cashed in a private pension, took out a series of loans, and even maxed out credit cards. So convinced was he that he was onto a winner.
9,000, 10,000, 7,000, 5,000. This is just some of the amounts that I have invested with Matthew Adams, making a total of 290,000 odd.
It was a huge sum, but John was confident that he was doing the right thing. As he says, Matthew Adams Limited was telling him that by acquiring a bigger portfolio of whiskey, he'd have more chance of profit by selling to another investor.
It was going so well. And then as the figures got bigger, the information flow got less.
John says the firm would regularly encourage him to release cash for further whiskey purchases. But in autumn 2022, it started to get less and less responsive.
They were always there to give me an answer why they hadn't replied. You know, coronavirus, no transport. Just create a bit of a breach of trust, I would say, if nothing else.
By Christmas 2022, it was all too much to bear. Having kept his investments to himself until now, he finally started to share with his family, including his daughter-in-law, Elizabeth.
John started talking about this investment. John said it was a lot. We thought possibly 50,000. So when we found out it was nearly 300,000, it was quite a shock. You know, it's somebody's life savings, isn't it?
By now, John had become very unhappy with the investment decisions being made by Matthew Adams Limited, as well as the lack of communication. So he decided to stop investing anymore, relying on the assurances he'd been given that his whiskey investment would grow over time, while it was safely stored in a specialist vault. But in May 2023, his confidence even in that began to unravel. He received a letter telling him Matthew Adams Limited had gone bust. Of course, John was worried. Of the £290,000 of whiskey he'd bought, he had a paper trail showing £180,000 of it was safely in storage. As for the rest, he had absolutely no idea where it was or how he could get his hands on it.
I had 110,000 in stock that had not been gone into the warehouse, but also had been paid for.
Concerned that John had been left high and dry by Matthew Adams Limited, Elizabeth began digging into the company's accounts. With little paper trail to follow, all she had to go on was what John told her about how the firm operated. So she wrote to us for help.
It's all been done over the phone. Nothing was ever written down. It's all just John talking to them on the phone, not giving him time to think about what he was doing or how much it was, because they were always rushing him towards the end, rushing him to, you know, to part with thousands of pounds.
If I was being honest with myself, I have to assume it's gone. Whisky scenario.
Now the debt John has accrued has taken its toll, and to keep up with the payments, he's been forced to sell the home that he's lived in for more than 40 years. And John's family say he's an absolute shadow of his former self.
It's really impacted his life. He's definitely not the same person. He's much more cautious, more quiet, I'd say, and his health as well has been affected.
Elizabeth has spoken to the administrators of Matthew Adams Limited, while John has contacted the storage company in a bid to reclaim his whisky. But he now bitterly regrets ever getting involved with whisky investments in the first place.
I want to highlight to people, be more careful than I was. Don't give your money willy-nilly to anybody. I let myself down and let my family down. Maybe I wasn't firing on all cylinders on various occasions. Other things were distracting me. The pushing, the hard sell. Doing the right thing is highlighting it. That's all I can do, is rebuild my life, if you like, and readjust, keep my expenses down, and start again.
Well, there you have it, a really heartbreaking story from John. And joining me now is Katie, who's one of our hardworking producers, and Catherine Hart from the Chartered Trading Standards Institute. And Catherine, I'll come to you in just a minute. But Katie, I know you've been working really hard on this particular case. What have you discovered from John?
It hasn't been easy, but we do think that some of John's money was spent on whisky and that it is being stored in the professional vaults, which Matthew Adams Limited told him it was sent to. And the company that manages that storage has told him they are happy to give access to John and that they have been speaking to him and his family.
So that's an independent source holding the whisky, is that right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and how much money do you reckon that John has paid into that?
Well, we do believe that the earlier payments that he made, totalling around £180,000, were spent on whisky. Unfortunately, that leaves around £100,000 worth of payments unaccounted for. So our team and John's family as well have been pouring through his paperwork, and we can't find any record of those later payments actually being transferred into whisky. So I did contact the administrators of Matthew Adams Limited, but they've said that while the liquidator's investigation is ongoing, that they can't comment.
Well, what do we know about the value of the £180,000 that John put in? I mean, would the whisky that's being held by a third party, would that be still worth that amount of money or more?
Well, we've contacted a few experts with a view to getting a true value of the stock that John owns if he were to try and sell it today. We weren't able to get an exact figure for the stock that he does own. But the really awful part is that the information from the experts we've spoken to suggests that it is not worth close to what he paid for it.
Well, of course, that is devastating news for John and his family, and I should say at this stage that we have shared this information with them. I want to turn to Catherine now, because it is such a horrible case, but would you regard John's case as a scam?
I think in John's case, it's an investment that's gone horribly wrong. However, putting John's case to the side, we know that at Action Fraud last year, there was 89 cases or reports that related to alcohol investments, and there's a loss of about £3 million. So it is quite a significant problem, and we think it's on the rise.
Why is it on the rise, do you think?
I think because the weak pound, where people are just wanting to invest in something tangible. But unfortunately, I mean, there's an awful lot of investment opportunities out there. We hear about art, we hear about property, we hear about cryptocurrency, we hear about whisky and alcohol. The unfortunate thing is a lot of these times they are not regulated, so therefore people are trying to put their money in but don't really know what's going to happen in the future.
What other general advice would you give to people who get sucked in like this, you know, to a commodity that gets the glossy sell, and they think, oh, this is great, I'll put my money in?
So I think the first thing, when you receive that telephone call and it sounds a brilliant opportunity, just take a few minutes, go and actually do a little bit of research. Talking to friends and family is really, really important, because what sometimes you think is a really good idea, is when you actually say it out loud, it isn't perhaps a good idea as you think. But also seeking proper advice. So if you're going to invest in the likes of whiskey or alcohol, maybe go and speak to somebody that's in the know, somebody from the Whisky Federation or the auction houses, that sort of thing. Do a little bit of homework. But the most important thing is, if you feel that you've been misled in any way, speak out as soon as you can.
Thank you very much, Katie. And Catherine, thank you very much indeed for your advice. Thank you.
Now, buying a used car can be fraught with potential pitfalls, one of which is the risk that the mileage showing on the dashboard just might have been tampered with to make the car appear to have covered far fewer miles than it really has.
Yes, it's an increasing threat that you might remember we covered in our last series when we helped one man who learned the car he'd owned for 18 months had actually been clocked. But in the few months since we first featured it, a new problem has cropped up. What should happen to cars after the truth about their mileage has been uncovered?
It's a tactic once beloved of many a dodgy car dealer, including Danny DeVito's character in the movie Matilda.
Watch your speedometer.
We're talking about car clocking. But if you thought that this very 20th century scam had been consigned to history by all the computer wizardry inside today's cars, you'd be wrong, as Adrian Palmer from the Wirral has learned the hard way. When we first caught up with him in January 2024, he told us how he'd been a fan of BMWs for decades. And in 2020, he'd bought his plushest Beamer yet.
This ticked all the boxes with the quality of the finish, and it was very low mileage, 15,000 miles.
The 15-month-old motor had set Adrian back £23,000 from his local branch of car supermarket chain Motorpoint.
It had a bit more specification on, and when I saw it, I fell in love with the car. I thought it couldn't be better.
One thing it didn't come with was a service history. But it's not unusual for a car this young to have not had its first major service yet.
I was slightly worried about not having the service history, but it wasn't a big issue. It was due for a service at £22,000. I was delighted with the car when I got it.
For the next couple of years, Adrian and his wife Irene wafted around the Wirral and beyond with no problems, until on the way back from a holiday in Cornwall.
Driving up the M5 near Taunton, and the whole instrument panel went blank.
The speedometer, rev counter, warning lights, even the fuel gauge, all vanished from the screen in front of him.
It was very frightening to drive along the road without not knowing what speed you're doing, and not knowing if any warning lights were coming on, and not knowing if you're going to get home, really.
As soon as he did get the car home, Adrian booked it into his local BMW dealership, which told him that the whole instrument cluster would need to be replaced at a cost of £2,600.
I'd had 25,000 miles on the clock, and I thought a car like this would be going for 80,000 before anything like that would occur. But there was no option to have it done, so it was great to just bite the bullet and go ahead with it.
That felt like a huge blow, but when the repair was made, things got a whole lot worse.
They had removed the instrument cluster and found a mileage blocker, which is something I've never heard of, to be honest with you.
A mileage blocker is a lot more technical than Danny DeVito's power drill, but the effect is the same. Changing the car's odometer to make it look as if it's covered far fewer miles than it really has. And the one on Adrian's motor meant the actual mileage couldn't be determined. BMW told us that once the mileage blocker is removed, the mileage will reset to the last known mileage, or, if none is recorded, to 0. In Adrian's case, the figure was reset to around 13,000 miles, potentially far less than the true mileage.
I asked them how many miles did they think it had done, and they said somewhere around 50,000 miles.
But worse still, because of that anomaly, he was stuck with a vehicle he couldn't sell.
And it's impossible. All the dealers will say, well, the mileage isn't correct, so we can't sell it.
When we spoke to Motorpoint about Adrian's experience, it told us that all vehicles are prepared and inspected in line with industry best practice, and that it takes pride in its vehicle quality customer service. And in January 2024, it agreed to buy back Adrian's car at a price above market value. But since then, there's been a twist in the tale.
Well, there has indeed been a twist in the tale, because 6 weeks after Adrian's BMW was taken back by the dealership, we found it for sale with a different used car dealer and with no suggestion that it had been clocked. Well, joining me now to talk about what on earth's going on here is motor trade expert Ian Ferguson. Ian, first off, can a clocked car be resold like this?
No, the law says it has to be made clear to the consumer before they make a buying decision that the car's had a mileage clocking event or been clocked or discrepancy.
And can you tell us what happened to the car after Adrian handed it back to the dealership?
So the dealership followed the rules. They registered the car correctly with the National Mileage Register to say that it had a mileage discrepancy. They then sold the car at auction and made it expressly clear that the car had had a mileage alteration. However, the day after it was sold at auction, the car was then MOT'd with 19,200 miles and then found its way to be for sale at a London car dealership. And here's the advert. Now, what the advert shows is that the car's clearly got 29,200 miles.
Oh, wow.
There's no mention of the car having been clocked or any discrepancy. And it looks like a lovely car. It makes reference to a full service history, 3 months warranty, 2 sets of keys, but nothing in there about the fact that the car's had a mileage clocking event and the mileage can't be relied upon.
Wow. Well, when we found out about this, we got onto that dealership, and one of the owners told us that he was aware the car had been clocked, which is why they'd put more miles on the advert. But is that actually allowed?
Absolutely not. They've plucked a figure out of thin air. Nobody knows what the true mileage of this car actually is. So the mileage that they put on it may look realistic and it might make the car look more attractive for sale, but it's clearly wrong.
Well, the dealership has told us that it was aware of some mileage discrepancy at the time, though only became aware of the full story when we got in touch. It says it took the car off sale pending further investigation and now plans to advertise it again with details of the mileage blocker in the description. And Ian, is that perfectly legal?
As long as they make it clear that the car's either been clocked or has had a blocker fitted, yes, that would be legal. But I think it'd be very difficult for them to adequately explain to any potential consumer or buyer what a mileage blocker actually is and what the repercussions of that having been fitted are.
Broadening it out from the particular car that we've been talking about, what kind of a risk is anyone buying a previously clocked car facing?
Well, cars have to be maintained correctly. Things like brake fluid changes, gearbox oil changes, servicing has to all be done at the correct intervals. If the car's been clocked or blocked and the mileage has been altered, then it may not have had the proper servicing at the proper time, so it may not be safe.
The car history checking service, HPI, says around 1 in 14 of the cars it looks at have a mileage discrepancy, which sounds absolutely enormous. But there must actually be plenty of cases where clocking has never come to light at all. So if you're in the market for a second-hand car, what are the signs you should be looking for to show that it might have been clocked?
Well, the obvious ones are the car looks more worn than its age and mileage would suggest. But if you're buying a used car and you want to be certain, then you can make checks with electronic diagnostic equipment that the dealership could do for you. And if you ask, they should be able to do it for you without any cost, just to make sure that you're confident when you're buying it. But if you're looking at the condition of a car, with modern cars that are made to last a long, long time, it's very difficult nowadays to look for obvious signs of wear that would give you a true idea of what's happened to the car.
Daunting stuff, actually, Ian. But thank you anyway.
Thank you.
Well, it's time now to fire more of your questions at our experts. So, Gary and Sarah, brace yourselves for these questions. First one actually to you, Sarah. Andrea Coxford says that she's been given an incorrect parking fine for double dipping. I wasn't familiar with the term, but apparently it's used when a driver enters and leaves the car park twice in one day. But the ANPR only registers the first entry and the last exit, and she wants to know what she can do to appeal and prove her innocence.
And double dipping happens more than you might think. The key here is evidence. So if she can show that she actually wasn't in the car park for all these hours, so maybe she might have a receipt if she went shopping, or even if she went to a friend's, then get just a statement from them and then complain to the parking company. And if she doesn't get anywhere, find out which trade body they're a member of, and then you can complain to them.
I've got one here for you, Gary, from Debbie Tilley, and indeed several others on Facebook who are all telling us that potholes have been destroying their car tyres, costing them for repairs. They've asked where they stand for compensation.
Again, evidence is the key with pothole claims. So you need to get a report from the mechanic, an invoice from the tyre company. You need to have evidence of the pothole itself, so a photograph or a video. And usually the pothole has to be the depth of about a 20p coin for it to be something that you can take action about.
Most of them are considerably more than that.
Certainly they are. And then, lastly, and this is the most difficult bit, you have to actually pin the blame on the local authority who are responsible for the road. Now, they can defend it if they say, well, we've got a road maintenance programme, but you are entitled under the Freedom of Information to get a copy of their road maintenance programme, and it can often be fatal to a defence by the local authority if they've previously been told about that pothole and not acted upon it. So get your evidence together, Debbie, and good luck.
Firm and fair. This is for you, Sarah. Kathy Weller says her monthly rent has gone up by over £300 in one go. She asks, is this legal and is there anything she can do about it?
Well, if she's renting in the private rented sector, then there are some rules in place, and it depends a bit on where she is in the tenancy. So if she's in the first 6 or 12 months, sort of fixed term part, then there are rules about when rent increases can happen. If she's outside that, which most people will be if they're in the private rented sector, then the landlord can increase the rent by what's called the kind of market average, so she can do some research and find out what other properties are being rented for. I have to say, in a very competitive market, landlords often know there are more people chasing properties than there are rental properties available. But she should complain to the landlord if she thinks it's unfair or can't pay. Maybe suggest they meet halfway, if that's possible. But if you're not happy, then you can go to an independent tribunal and complain about the rent increase there.
Gary, one for you from Jonathan Hobson, who says that he wants to know what he can do about his home, which is covered in a black mould. He says he's complained to the Housing Association, but hasn't got anywhere.
I'm very sorry to hear that about Jonathan. How awful for him. And on this programme, we have covered before AWAB's law. So social landlords do have a duty, a specific duty, to make sure that properties are not infested with mould. So he should complain to his social landlord. If he doesn't make progress with them, he can go to the Housing Ombudsman Service and they will look favourably upon him if he has the evidence, which it sounds like, unfortunately, he will have the evidence to show how severe the mould is.
And on that note, I'm afraid that's where we have to leave it for today. But remember, our email address for any of your questions is ripupbritain@bbc.co.uk. And we're going to be back here very soon answering as many